Hello and welcome back to HiCode tutorial. In this video I will talk about the insert operation in HiCode database. So in HiCode database there are 4 types of insert operations. So first insert, it is insert one entry and by field, and we can insert one entry of customized data, and we can insert multiple entries. And the last one, batch insert. In this video, I will cover the first 3 of them. First, we've come to the editor, and this is an event registration page that I've made from the previous video. If you're not with us, you can refer to the video on form widget. Today's video and the following ones on databases and services will all be based on this example. Let's first take a look at this example. When the user fills in these blanks and clicks submit, they will submit name, phone, and a piece of introduction to the database. So the first thing we need is to have a database. To store data, we will need the help of server. That is where you can create databases. Choose this local database and rename it to registration list. For the fields we need, we can refer to the user interface we have created. So name, phone, and introduction. For better demonstration, I will change this phone to age, because phone numbers and ID numbers are usually stored in texts, whereas I can store ages in integers so that I can show you the difference of different field types. Age, and this one should be enter age. The interface is messed up. I can give these 2 text boxes a unified width and move them to align them to the right side. And go back to the database, add a field, first one name, and it's a text, confirm. Next field, age, and its type is integer. Next, I will have texts for self-introduction. And now our database is prepared. The next step is to design a service. We can find service on the right side in the logical widget bar. Select server and add a service. Of course, you can also add a service from the left widget bar. It is the same thing as adding it here. Inside a service panel, we have its input parameters, output parameters, and a default event when the service is called. But before we start it, we have to make clear of our goal. So for today, this service is for submitting data to the database. Rename this service to submit. Remember, there are 4 ways of inserting or submitting data, and we will start with the most common one. Insert one entry by field. Because we are going to submit name, age, and introduction, we can have these 3 as the input parameters. The first parameter is name. This name indicates the parameter's name. So parameter 2 is age. and the third one, introduction. We can define the type for a parameter, for example, number, string, boolean, or object. Select the type and it will prevent input values of different types from submission. So for name, we will have it string, and for age, a number. This will also be a string, and the name and age are required. And for debug value, we will talk about it later. Next, let's look at the output parameters. The output parameters are the response from the server to the stage when the service is done. For this kind of service, such as a submit service, we usually have 3 output parameters. Namely, result, reason, and data. Inside this parameter, I will store whether the service is executed successfully. And inside this reason, I will store why the service failed, if it does. And in this data parameter, I will store the data of submission. What exactly did it submitted? You can use such 3 parameters for many of your service designs. The parameters are ready, and let's go on to work on the service definition. Service definition is similar to an event. It has a trigger, a target, and actions. We're going to submit data to the database, so the target is of course the database. And for the action, we are first going to use this insert one entry and by field. When I selected this, it automatically offered me these 3 fields and asked me to set values for them. So where do this come from? It is fetched from the database. I can try add another field here. For example, test. And going back to the service, I can renew this action, and a test field appeared. Delete this test field. Renew, and it's gone. So next, what should I fill in here? I should fill in the values that I received from the stage. And that is our input parameters. Click and it will provide me with this drop-down list. And above this header info, I have name, age, and intro. These are the input parameters that I have defined. Select it. So this means when the service is called, I will add to this field the value that comes from parameter 1, name. For example, if I add a parameter 4, I can also select this parameter 4. And next, we'll have to set these output parameters to tell the stage the submission result. And to do this, we'll need callback. Click this action and click callback. Callbacks are available for asynchronous actions, which means we don't know at what time it will be completed. So we can use a callback to wait for it and define the next steps to perform when it is completed. So when this insert action is completed, we are going to set the parameters of this service. So the target should be the current service. And in the action section, the editor offers us automatically set output parameters. Besides, we have some other choices: set cookies, set output parameters and return, and set output status. In the beginners and intermediate courses, we'll only use this set output parameters. These three parameters come from the output parameters set by ourselves. We can select. For the result, we will use result and if it is successful. And for the reason, we will use result and failure reason. And for the data, result and object array. Now we have completed the definition for this service for data submission. Now we can go to the debug session and try to debug this service. Enter a name, and for the age, and now we can click this debug button. In the debug result session, we have first result equals to true, which means the submission process is successful. And the reason is empty, because this is the reason for if the submission failed. And we also have all the data that is going to return to the front end. And go to the database. We can find Leslie, 41 years old, and my name is Leslie, all inside our database. But this is only added from the debugging. How do we actually call a service from the front end? And that is what we are going to do next. Going back to the stage, we are going to call the submit data service with the submission button. Go to the event. Delete this event from the last video on form widget. Add a new event. Also, when it's clicked, the target will be from the server, this submit data. And the action is automatically call service. And it shows us the three parameters, name, age, and introduction, that we have defined in the service. Here, the input parameters. They are now awaiting inputs. So we are going to select data sources for them. For name, it will be the value from the enter name input box. And the same for age, for enter age input box. And this one. Okay, and when it is completed, we can use the system. And when the service is completed, we can notify the user with a message. We can notify the user with a message. The target should be View Utility, and select this Show Toast. And for the message, we will use result. This result indicates all the return value of this service. And this result with the lowercase is one of the output parameters defined by ourselves. We can go to the preview to check our design. Also open the console, and we can simulate a cell phone. enter name and age, and my name is Charles, and hit submit. We can see just now, instead of showing us the result, it showed an empty alert. It gave us an empty toast. We can go to the console and look for the reasons. Inside network, and click this, it says detail, parameter type error, age. Let's go to the headers to find out why. Actually, what we are looking for is inside this payload. Request payload, and you can find its age here. The font style is in red and the numbers are put in quotes. This indicates that this value is a string, not a number. But remember, the input that we are waiting for in this service is limited to number. That is why it is not successfully submitted. Therefore, there is something wrong with the input box. Go to the input box, and we can find the input type is now text. Change it to integer. And now it is a number. Preview again. Name again, age, my name's Charles. Submit. And we can see it showed us true, which means it is successful. Going back to the network, and we can see this age is changed to a number. Network is a very helpful tool for troubleshooting. We can go to network in console and select this run NID. Then we can find our defined parameters inside payload or headers. We can also see the return results in this preview section. We can also go to check the database, and the Charles appeared here. And from the experience just now, we know that we need to notify the user when something went wrong. So let's go back to the submit button. We're going to complete this logic for the submit button. Also, that is why we set output parameters for if it is successful and the failure reason. Select this callback line and add a condition. Drag it into this condition and write if the result and the result equals to true. When I enter true, it turns blue, telling you that this is a Boolean value. So this sub-branch action here will only be executed if the success status is true. I will change this to submitted. And otherwise, else, otherwise it means the submission process failed. Add an action to it, and view utility, show another toast, and inside this message I will use result and the reason of failure. Also, when the submission process is successfully done, we will need to clear these input boxes. Clear value. I can copy paste this for the other two boxes, for the age box and the introduction box. Now, this is what a complete workflow should look like. Let me go through the steps of calling a service from the stage again. So after designing a service, you can debug and make sure the workflow in the service is functioning fine. Then we can go to the stage and add an event to call the service. First, select input values for the service. And then we should take different steps according to the returned result from the server. We'll have a set of logic for successfully submitted and another set of actions for if the service is failed. Please remember, during your design, never presume that your workflow or services are going to function as you expected. Always reserve some space or a workflow for if something goes wrong, and write out all the possibilities. This will improve the user experience, and it will also make it easier for you to find out and solve the problems. Let's go to the preview and check the result. Enter a name, and submit. Now we can see something went wrong here. It should have shown us a submitted when the data is successfully submitted. Let's go back to see if the submission is successful. In the registration list, those above are some data I've submitted for testing. You can just ignore them. But anyway, the TOBI we have just added is actually here, so the submission is successful. So why did it not show us the toast submitted? The problem is here, because in HYCODE editor, Boolean values are represented with true and false, and when these two words turn blue, it indicates that this is a Boolean value. And what we are expecting here is actually a string, and you cannot compare a Boolean with a string. We can go look at the service and debug. This is the value it is expecting, in quotes, which means it is a string. We can copy it and go back to this place and replace this true with a true in quotes. Now let's go to preview again. Now we can see the submit here. Next thing, we'll look at another way to insert data, and that is insert one entry. We can create a new service, this time we will use this insert one entry instead of the by field option. It is a different way of submitting data, but it should have the same outcome. With this method, it is only expecting one input, 3 values, or it is the same when you have more, all in one object. Therefore, we'll only need one input, and that is the combination of data to be submitted. But for the output parameters, we'll have the same 3 from the last service. So first the result, whether it is successful, and the reason if it failed, and the data. Let's move on to complete the definition. Inside this input box, we can see the format it is expecting. So inside a curved bracket, a pair of key and value, and different pairs are separated with a comma. So later we will give a value in this format to the input. And for this box, we will select the input that we have defined, submission data, and click this action, callback, and when it's completed, select the current service, set the result to result.isSuccess, and for reason, result failure reason, and data should be the object. And now basically we have finished the definition. If I want to debug this one, I will have to write a value in JSON format. That would be too much work, so I will just skip it and jump to using the form widget to submit. Let's go back to this button. We'll use this button for this service. Change its name. Before I bind this button to the service we've just created, let's use it to see what the data submitted from the form look like. Those are from the last video, so delete them. An action, select form, and get value. When it is completed, use the system and console log to see the form data, and write some hint for ourselves. And the form field for enter age is still named phone from the last video. Change it to age, and field type set to number. Now we can go to preview and see the form data's format. Name, age, introduction, and see the format. And here it is in the console. The data is automatically arranged in this format: a key followed by a value, comma, key, value, and so on and so forth. This is because we have given each input a form field widget. And inside this form field widget, we define the field name, for example, introduction, intro, and here it is. And the corresponding input box will be its value. And since this form data is right in the format of an object, we can directly use it as the service's input and insert one entry in one single time. Now let's go to this one's event. Add an action here inside the callback. Use this service. We are adding this following steps inside the callback because these should be performed after the get value is done. And for the service's inputs submission data, we should select result, and this is the result from this callback, and the form data. And when the service is completed, we can go to the last service and copy the workflow. Press Shift and select them all. The workflow of calling these two services are basically the same. The only difference is we no longer need to click and select a value for each of these inputs. Therefore, as you're getting familiar with the data structure, this kind of submission would be more convenient. Let's go to the preview and test this one out. And use this customize submit. It showed us successfully submitted. And inside the database, the new record is added to the tail. And because we are adding data with using its key and value, these ones, we'll have to make sure that these keys are exactly the same as the field names in our database. For example, if I go to this intro and for example, I can change it to introduction, preview, and name, age, some random introduction, and use this customize submit. And you can see it is successfully submitted. But inside this object, instead of the former intro, we have now introduction. And when I go to the database, we do have the name and age for Eileen, but the intro is blank. This is because the field name and the key name are not consistent. In this way, it cannot find the input. And for the last part, we also have another choice, that is insert multiple entries. Just like the former one, when we were inserting one entry, it is expecting an object. The keys and values should be in a curved bracket, and now it has an additional pair of square brackets. It means it is expecting multiple objects, and in other words, an object array. So that if you have understood the last service, you can use this just as well. And that is all for this video on database inserting option. Thank you very much for watching.